The next morning, Percy wanted to call Rachel, but he didn't have a phone, and there weren't any in the camp. Well, there was one landline in the big house, but that was off limits. If anyone wanted to make contact with someone, they'd use an iris message. Percy never got over the fact that as a demigod, no matter what you did, mobile phone calls could somehow alert monsters to your presence, like the way blood attracted sharks. Annabeth had a cell phone, but he couldn't just ask her, "Hey, can I borrow your phone so I can call Rachel?" They say it wasn't worth the risk doing it even in the safety of the camp's magic borders. It was that time of the week again for cabin inspection, and this time it was Percy and Annabeth's turn to do the inspection. Percy's cabin got a 3 out of 5, unfortunately. Who could blame him? It was easier when Tyson was around. Tyson loved cleaning. Annabeth went over the scores for all the other cabins. Demeter, 4 out of 5. Ares and Apollo, 1 out of 5. Hephaestus, 3 out of 5. Aphrodite, 5 out of 5. Hermes, 2 out of 5, no surprise. And Dionysus, 3 out of 5. Then Percy found himself staring at Annabeth, which felt pretty stupid since he'd seen her a bunch of times. Sure, she was always cute, but over the years she was becoming more mature-looking than before, and she was seriously beautiful. Anybody could have easily mistaken her for an Aphrodite kid. As she went over the list, she finally explained to Percy that Clarice and Michael were fighting yesterday about some chariot they rescued in Philadelphia from some of Luke's allies last week. She said both their cabins worked together to rescue it. The Apollo kids seized it during the battle, but the Ares cabin led the raid. So they've been fighting about who gets it ever since. Seriously? Percy asked. They know that the fate of the world is near and they're worried about some stupid chariot? Don't worry, they'll get over it, said Annabeth. Eventually. Finally, they walked into the Athena cabin, which was straightened and well organized. Annabeth's bed was the only one unmade because she left Daedalus's laptop and her notes all over. As she cleaned up, Percy just stood there nervously. Even during cabin inspection, it was against the rules for two campers to be, alone together in a cabin. That came up a lot when Beckendorf and Selena started dating. And just from knowing that most of the gods and demigods are biologically related, you're probably thinking, ew, gross! Genetically speaking, gods technically don't have DNA, so nobody cared about your godly side of the family as long as couples weren't siblings. So say if it were two kids both from the Athena cabin, then that would be wrong. But if it were just one kid from the Athena cabin and one from the Poseidon cabin, hypothetically speaking, then that's okay. Get it? Percy wasn't sure why, but those facts stayed stuck in his head as he watched Annabeth clean up. So, have you gotten any good info on your laptop? He asked. Only too much, she answered. I could spend my whole life just going through it all. Yeah, that sounds fun, said Percy sarcastically. She brushed her hair out of her face like she did when she was nervous. You know, she said, this situation with Selena and Beckendorf, it kind of makes you think about what's important, like losing people who are... Yeah? Well, losing who matters most in your life. Yeah, said Percy. Is your dad okay? He kind of regretted asking that, since it was usually a tight subject, but she nodded. He wanted to take me to Greece this summer, she said. I always wanted to see the Parthenon. Well, that's okay, Percy said. There'll be other summers, right? That was a real boneheaded question. He was facing threats that could mean the end of the world after all. If they failed, there may not be any more summers for them after this week. Annabeth checked her inspection scroll. 3 out of 5, she said. On the way back to the big house, Annabeth asked, Have you heard from Grover at all? Percy hadn't heard anything from Grover for a long while now. He could recall hearing about Grover organizing dryads in Central Park, but neither he or anyone had seen or heard from him in 2 months. Percy hadn't even gotten any empathy link messages from him. He almost forgot about that. He and Grover did in fact still have an empathy link that connected them together. Grover once said that if he died, Percy would die too because they were linked, so Percy probably would have known if something happened to him. He wondered if Grover was still in Central Park. Then he thought about the dream with Rachel and her paintings. He knew just mentioning her was asking for trouble, but he had always depended on Annabeth for advice. He told her about the dream with Rachel, and about her painting of Luke as a kid. For a moment, she stayed silent. Then she said, "What do you want me to say, Percy?" "I don't know," Percy said, "but you're the best strategist I know. If you were Kronos planning this war, what would you do next?" "Same thing, I guess," she said. "I'd hit Olympus directly while the gods were in the west." "Just like Rachel's picture," he said. "Percy, she's just a mortal," she said with a tight voice. "But what if her dreams are true?" he asked. "And those titans in my dreams said that there's more to come, and that painting she made of Luke as a kid was just too perfect. What could that mean?" "We'll just have to be ready," Annabeth said. "How? Just look at the camp. We can't even stop fighting each other, and I'm supposed to get my stupid soul reaped." "I knew we shouldn't have shown you the prophecy," she said. "All it did was scare you. You always run away from things when you're scared." There was anger in her voice, but also pain at the same time. Percy had no idea what her problem was, but he was left completely stunned. "Me? Run away?" "Yes, you! You're a coward, Percy Jackson. If you don't like our chances, maybe you should just go on that stupid vacation with your girlfriend." She pushed past him and left him in the dark. Again. Percy decided once again it was time for sword practice in the arena. Doing that always cheered him up. Plus, he wanted to see an old friend. When he got there, Mrs. O'Leary pinned him to the ground and started licking Percy's head. Okay, calm down, girl," he said. "I'm happy to see you too." This was another problem Percy just realized. Since last year, he relied on Beckendorf to look after his dog during the school semesters, and kept her locked in the arena. But now that Beckendorf was gone, Percy wasn't sure what to do with her now. Then she made a gesture that told him she had to take a leak, and letting her do that in the arena was never a good idea. So they sped off into the woods. It was hard to catch up to her, but he followed her to the same glade where the Council of Cloven Elders put Grover on trial. And in the middle of the glade stood the most unusual trio: Juniper the tree nymph, Linnaeus the satyr, and Nico. "What is that underworld demon doing in my glade?" Linnaeus asked. "It's okay, Linnaeus," Percy said. "She's mine. She's trained." "Mr. D'Angelo, I absolutely refuse to help anyone any further with your father's minions disturbing the peace in my territory." "I'll walk the dog," Nico volunteered. After he left, Percy asked Juniper, "So what's this about?" "Percy, I was just worried about Grover. He wouldn't be gone this long unless maybe something happened. I was hoping that Linnaeus—"
"I told you," the satyr interrupted. "You are better off without that traitor."
"He's not a traitor," she said. "He's the bravest satyr ever. And I want to know where he is."
"Listen, young lady, that traitor hasn't sent any reports since we voted him into exile."
"You mean you tried to vote him into exile until Dionysus reasoned with you," Percy corrected.
He was an honorary council member. It wasn't a proper vote.
"I'll let him know you said that."
"Now see here, Mr. Jackson, this is none of your business."
"Grover is my friend," Percy said, "and he wasn't lying about seeing Pan. I saw him myself along with at least 4 of my friends. You were just too scared to accept the truth."
"We are better off without that liar,"
Linnaeus blurted. "If things are going so well, where's the rest of your council?" Percy asked.
"They're just taking time off to think. It's been quite a busy year, but I'm sure they'll be back."
It won't get any better automatically, he said. We need Grover. Don't you have any sort of tracking magic?
I told you I've heard nothing. He's probably dead.
Juniper tried to fight back a sob. He's not dead, Percy said. I can feel that much.
Empathy links, Linnaeus said. So unreliable.
Why don't you just ask around, Percy suggested. There's a war coming, and Grover went to help prepare the nymphs.
Without my permission, and it's not our war.
Percy didn't know what came over him, but the old goat made him so angry, he lifted him in the air. Listen to me. When Kronos attacks, he's gonna have packs of hellhounds. Once he's done killing all the gods, he'll kill all the demigods, the mortals, the animals, and every other living thing on this planet. You think he'll let the satyrs go free? You're a leader, right? So lean. Get out there and bring Grover back. He dropped the old bag on the ground.
Grover will never be accepted back, Linnaeus argued. He will die an outcast.
I'm sorry, Percy, Juniper said. I didn't really mean for you to get involved, but Linnaeus is still a Lord of the Wild. You don't want to make enemies with him. No problem, Percy said. Nico came back and said, Good job, Percy. From the look of his hoof prints, I'd say you'd shook him up pretty well. Juniper asked Nico if he could sense Grover, but he couldn't since Grover was a nymph, and nymphs didn't have mortal souls, but he promised to keep an eye out. Oh, I would have gone out there to look for him myself, but you know how we nymphs can't travel too far from our plants. If anything happened to him... He is alive, Juniper. I'm sure of it, said Percy. Don't worry. There must be a big explanation for why he hasn't contacted us. Mrs. O'Leary started taking interest in Juniper's dress. Oh no, she said. I've heard plenty about dogs and trees. I'm out of here. And she poofed into green mist. By the way, I'm sorry about Beckendorf, Nico said. He asked me to tell you he doesn't blame you, and that you shouldn't beat yourself up about it. Percy never got used to the fact that Nico, as a son of Hades, could talk to the dead. Oh, and he says he's waiting for someone, so he decided to stay in Elysium. I'm not quite sure what he meant. I had a vision of you on Mount Tam, Percy said. Was that real? Yeah, I was originally following a lead on my family. You know, just trying to figure out who my mother was, what happened to her, who got me and my sister out of that hotel and sent us to that school. I may have a new lead soon, but that's not important right now. You know why I'm here, don't you? Percy was afraid to admit it, but he did know. Ever since last year, when Nico suggested a plan to beat Kronos, Percy had nightmares about it. He got, what, a week before Typhon gets here? Nico asked. And all the other Titans are unleashed. Maybe it's time to think extreme. The other campers are no match for the Titan army. It all comes down between you and Luke, and there's only one way he could beat him. He had a point. Percy was easily wounded by a single touch from Kronos' scythe, and Percy couldn't even pierce Kronos. You could get the same power, Nico said. I know what the prophecy says, so unless you want to risk getting wreathed by a cursed blade... Percy wondered how Nico knew the prophecy. Probably from a ghost. You can't prevent a prophecy, Percy said. But you can fight it, Nico said. You could be invincible. Besides, once the fighting starts and you decide not to go through my plan, it'll be too late to change your mind. This is your last chance. And my sister risked her life to save you. Don't make it seem like she died for nothing. Do whatever it takes to stay alive and defeat Kronos. Percy knew it would be dangerous, but it might give him a fighting edge. Plus, he wanted to show Annabeth he wasn't a coward. All right, he said. So what do we do first? First, we have to retrace Luke's steps and learn more about his past, Nico said. We have to go see his mother in Connecticut.